Gus Ramsey needs no introduction after
Oh,
so
but
many
give me
great.
one anyway.
Well, we're going to get one in
Okay.
just because, it's
Okay.
sort of standard procedure, but people know who he is. Students know who he is in sports media. So many great years at ESPN, and now he's program director at the Dan Patrick School of Broadcasting, Sportscasting at Full Sail University. Also a talent coach, does that there, but also on the side at Gus Ram Productions. And we're going to tell his story, not just the career side, but what is he like as a dad? Where does the producer hat turn off? Because I have a feeling it's on 24/7, knowing that's what you've done in the business. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. First of all, Gus, thank you so much for doing this. I have heard that you have broken out the really nice microphone for the
Yeah.
conversation here. So I know it's below you, but I can tell you're taking this seriously.
Yeah, I broke out the Yeti. We use it in one of our classes, and I thought I can't just have computer audio for Brian. I got to step it up.
Well, I've had a lot of your colleagues on. Dennis Denninger was one of the most recent ones. And so it's finally great to land you. I had to go through like 5 different agents and secretaries just to
It's
get you
complicated.
on. But I wanted to start here because I know that you have a son who just graduated, if I'm not mistaken, his master's
Mhm.
degree.
Yeah.
And I know you are very smart yourself. But now that you have a son who has a master's degree, what about his smarts do you think he beats you in when it comes to his intelligence?
Probably most things. I was never a great student. I was probably a C plus, B minus if I was lucky kind of student. So I'm kind of one of those street smart guys. And one of those people who just knows what he knows. And for me, that was always sports. So it's funny, in coming to Full Sail, I've learned to be a hands-on visual learner, and or I should say I learned that that's what I am. And when I was growing up, that's not how schools taught. Schools were very much read, regurgitate, remember kind of stuff. So I think all my boys are smarter than me because they've got better advantages in terms of how things are taught today. And my dad was a teacher; he's very smart. I think brains probably skips a generation, so wait from him to my boys.
What is the greatest thing your father taught you?
Uh, oh boy, there's so many. He's going to be 90 in December. And as a lifelong teacher, he taught at the Greenwich Country Day School, and then he taught at the Robert Louis Stevenson School in Monterey. And he's impacted so many lives. And it's probably something I didn't even realize I was learning from him until I took this job, is how there's a certain point in your life, and for him it came much earlier, where your life isn't about you anymore. It's about others and giving back. And when my dad first got on Facebook, I remember I reached out to a bunch of people and said, "Hey, my dad's going to finally be on Facebook for his birthday, whatever year that was. I want everyone just to go in there and post a message to him, just letting them know what he meant to them." In my mind, it was kind of like the end of Mr. Holland's Opus. When all the past students come back and play the song, I thought, like, this is the closest I can kind of come to recreating that. And seeing the comments and seeing how my father impacted people's lives. And he was a ninth grade teacher. So it's not like he was getting them in high school or college, but they were still remembering the profound effect that he had on them. So that was probably the thing that I learned, is that, like, at some point when you do for others, your life takes on a whole new meaning. And that's something I've really discovered in my post ESPN life.
And that's what I admire so much about you. Gus Ramsey is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Is that this is a business that can be so focused on ego, but you have found in this, particularly over the course of your life, but even more so now, being a professor and a teacher, where you can really let your selflessness shine. And you've been an advocate for so many students. And I can't even imagine the level of pride that you have for so many of your former students who are going on and crushing it in this business of sports media. You talked about your father and what those comments must have meant to him when he received them. What to you is what really brings you the most validation?
Days like today, when 3 different grads reached out and told me they got jobs. So that's just so cool that, Dan and I built this program because we wanted to give back, and give back in 2 different ways. One, we wanted to give back to the industry that gave us great careers, and Dan is obviously still doing awesome in his, and all the things that we got to experience and the people we got to meet. And as you know, like, this is a really great industry to work in. And so you want to give back to the industry by hopefully providing it with people who are better prepared to enter it than maybe was happening prior to the start of our program, and can really hit the ground running and be good right away. But also give back to people who want to have the kind of career that we've been able to have. So when someone reaches out to me and says, I got my first offer today, that's just so cool. The Full Sail motto is, if you're serious about your dream, we'll take your dream seriously. And so to see people come here and really put in the time and the effort to learn what we're teaching and to go give it a shot. And we've got 5 people working at ESPN. We've had 3 or 4 go to Fox. We've had 1 at NESN, a couple at CBS. Those are behind the scenes people. So yeah, it's the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, but you can learn a lot of stuff. So there was an instance just this week where a guy who had been a PA for me on Baseball Tonight now works at MLB Network, Rich Cincinnamino, and he's doing a show every day or a few times a week with Sean Casey that they're putting out there on the internet. And he was looking for an intern. I'm like, I got a guy. Wow. And, Rich is hoping that this will grow into something bigger. And when it does, my guy is going to go from an intern to probably like a segment producer. So to be able to parlay those connections into, not only do I feel good for my student who's getting the opportunity, but I feel good that I'm delivering Rich, somebody I know is going to do a really good job for him.
Speaking of connections, and a golden one that you have developed over the years and your great relationship and friendship with Dan Patrick, what has he taught you? Something that he's taught you completely unrelated to sports and broadcasting.
We've had a lot of conversations about family, and I think as we've both gotten older, you kind of understand better the importance of it. Because as you said, when you're starting out in this industry, it's easy to get caught up in what you're doing day to day. When I first started at ESPN, I got hired December of '94. We were living down here in Winter Park. I told my wife, don't come up for a little while. I just need to get in there and get deep into ESPN and make sure I'm doing the right things, and I get off to a good start and come up in the spring. That way you can avoid, she's from Miami, so you can avoid winter and you'll feel maybe a little more comfortable coming up, but I just needed to immerse myself in it. And then, Dan likes to say, the better you get at this job, the worse your hours are, you're going to and so those first 10 years, it's just all about throwing yourself into it. And yeah, I started having kids and raising a family, but that work-life balance, which no one really talked about in the 90s, was a hard thing to manage. And I think as you get older and you see the importance of your family, and not that you're not aware of it, but it's easy to get caught up in the churn of the day-to-day in this business, especially when you're working weird hours. My first show was the 2:30 a.m. Sports Center, not the 1 a.m. from Los Angeles, 2:30 a.m. from Bristol, Connecticut. So my wife and I were ships passing in the night. She was working 9 to 5. I was working 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. So I think Dan and I have just kind of shared the conversations about how at some point realizing your wife and your kids and your family has to come first, no matter what level you're working at.
How does that realization that you just pointed out between you and your wife come to fold, in that you've probably had to have constant conversations? This is a growing thing, because there's such an unexpectedness to now you getting a job in sports media, you working odd hours, you not seeing her. But what sort of, you brought this up a little bit, but what sort of communication do you have to have with your significant other just on a regular basis, just to, in what you have found works, when we have seen so many times where spouses have great jobs, but they can't make it work because it's separate schedules or it's not conducive to a family environment. So you, in that day-to-day conversation, how were you able, when you were just getting started, to make that happen?
I think part of it is keeping the big picture in mind and knowing that this was for the long haul and for the good of what our family would look like someday. Working at ESPN was going to be a great opportunity. Now, when I got there, they weren't owned by Disney, but once they were owned by Disney, life got even better, for someone wanting to raise a family. And so the weird hours, the work in the holidays, or maybe missing a birthday, in some ways, you still have to keep the big picture in mind, is like, look, towards the end of this, salary's going up every year. Now I'm an executive type and I'm getting Disney stock as part of my annual bonus and things like that. That's the big picture. We're trying to grow our family and give them the best future that we possibly can. So if it means, maybe we won't see each other for a few days, or maybe the hours are going to be weird, that's a sacrifice you're willing to make. But I tell our students all the time, if you want 9 to 5, go down to Bed Bath and Beyond or somewhere like that and sign up for that. Yeah. But if that's not what this business is going to be. Every major holiday, sports are played. Every weekend, sports are played. So you're going to have a weird life, and you have to know that going in, and your partner has to know that going in.
You knew a lot about this business before you came over to Full Sail University and the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. And you've obviously mentored before you got to where you are now as a professor. But seeing you in your element now, hands-on with these students, obviously you've given untold and priceless advice in your support to them. How do they replicate that to you? And how have you learned from them?
Well, we're year-round school for starters, right? So there's only 4 weeks out of the year where we're not in class. So you're constantly exposed to it. There's no like long summer break and, oh, I haven't seen you in a bit. And our classes are only a month long. So they study for something for a month, then they move on to the next thing. So it's very much a churn. I have yet to have a student that I'm aware of, and we have 275 online, 125 on campus. It's much harder to keep tabs on the online students, obviously. But for the campus students, I've never seen someone come to the program and not be better by the end of it. Doesn't mean that they're talent ready or ever going to be talent, but I've seen them get better. And a lot of what you learn in this business transfers to so many things outside of just being a sportscaster. So part of what they teach me, they don't even know they're teaching me. And I see their growth, and I see what works. I see maybe what doesn't work. And because we're month over month, we're very fungible in that way that we can go, all right, this month we need to maybe focus a little bit on this, or this is 4 straight months where no one's quite picked this up. Maybe we need to teach it different. So it's really just about that observation. In a lot of ways, I'm kind of like the football coach up on the tower. I don't teach a class, but I'm in every class and I'm teaching all the time. And a lot of times it's just observing what I'm seeing in those classes and then figuring out a way to take that and adjust if needed.
How much of you being a teacher now plays into you being a morale booster for those that are in those classes, in that knowing that it can be a challenging field, but being there, supporting them, giving them faith and hope that they can make it?
Well, thankfully now we've got shining examples of it. When we first started the program, I moved down here July 1st, 2017, with Dan and Full Sail not having yet reached an agreement on the program. So for me, it was a leap of faith, but it was a calculated leap of faith. It was too good of an idea on both sides for it not to happen. And all I was doing in Connecticut was talent coaching. I can do that anywhere. My wife's a teacher. She can do that anywhere. So I told her at the end of the day, if we're just moving from Southington to Winter Park, that's a win. And if we have to keep doing the same things that we're already doing, that's fine. So I think in the beginning, a lot of students were also taking a leap of faith. What's this Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting? Who are these people teaching it? So there was a lot of just that faith in that this is going to work. And so the morale boosting comes into play in the beginning, probably more now than what we're doing today, because today I can say, look at this guy. He came through our program, didn't want to be on camera. When he got here, now he's on camera because he got really good at it, or didn't know what he wanted to do, or didn't know what she wanted to do, got a news producer job in Kansas City. That happened. We don't have a producing class in our program, but someone got a news producer job in the 30-second market in the country because of the experiences that they have here. So that makes it much easier. But still, most of our students are young adults who are going through all kinds of things you go through when you're those ages. Some people are moving from other parts of the country and they're just trying to get their feet under them. But we've had people in their 40s come to our program and they're looking for that, this is what I've been waiting for kind of thing. And so maybe they need a different kind of boost. One of the stories I love to tell, there's a guy named Scott Coral, who was a PA for me at ESPN.
I've heard of him, yes.
In the late 90s. He was a PA on the 11 o'clock show that I was working on. Came to our program on the younger side of 50, graduated as an online student on the other side of 50, and is now a weekend news anchor in Chattanooga. So there's a guy who found his dream at age 50. So if that doesn't get you excited about what you can achieve, I don't know what more I can do for you.
He is going to be a guest. Scott Turkin, who you probably know, he suggested that he come on. And so we're going to make that happen. And that's such a cool story that people's lives are changed at various stages in their particular lives. And I would think, talking about your life, Gus, you might be a producer by trade, but I have a feeling that even when the television isn't on and you're not in the classroom, you're not teaching, that we're still seeing the mental attributes of a producer. So if I'm with you and I'm not in class and I'm not necessarily working on something sports broadcasting related with you, how am I going to tell that you are a producer?
All kinds of different ways, because that timing mechanism I don't think ever turns off. And so if my wife tells me dinner will be ready in 2 minutes, I look at that like, oh my gosh, there's so much I can do in the next 2 minutes. Whereas my wife looks at it like, you got to hurry, we're only 2 minutes away from dinner. Or if I leave the house and I have to drop my son off at a certain place by a certain time, and then I want to make a stop at my local smoothie place before I get to campus, I know in my head I need to drop him off by 8:30 so I can be to Planet Smoothie by 8:45, and that'll get me to campus by 9. Whereas most people will finally probably just accept, I'm running late, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. I look at it like, my show is heavy. What am I going to kill out of my show to get on time? So maybe I'm going to kill Planet Smoothie today because I want to be at campus by 9, not 9:08.
That's so fascinating. It's with you all over the place. It doesn't matter what it is. And with the producer comes a rundown. So if you were to produce, let's just say, a 30-minute show that would spotlight your life and tell your life story, what is that rundown going to look like? How are you stylistically going to put this thing together that shows you in the way you want to be shown, in the best way?
Well, here's a mantra that I've developed over probably the course of the last year. And I got a little bit of a ignition from it in a Q&A we did with Michael Wilbon for our classes. I tell people, start by asking yourself 2 questions. What's the story and how do you want to tell it? Once you identify the story, that's such a burden because so many people have like 5 stories at once that they want to tell. So I say, just pick the one thing and then the figuring out of how you want to tell it. It could be funny, it could be straightforward, it could be full of quotes, it could be anecdotal, whatever it is. So if I was to ask myself, what's the story I want to tell of my life? There's a lot of good stuff I'm going to have to leave out, but I'll start with just kind of how my career got to where it is, because I think most people still tend to try to figure out what they're going to do when they're in college. I knew probably in 8th grade that I was going to work in broadcasting someday. 1982, the Dolphins and Jets played a game on NBC that they didn't use broadcasters. The teams were so awful. They said, let's just, as a lark, put it out there with no broadcasters and see if it draws rating. Well, I grabbed the rosters out of the newspapers and my tape recorder and sat there in my living room and did play-by-play of that game. My junior year in high school, I had a radio show on the town radio station in Greenwich, Connecticut. And back then, when people were at parties, they either played records or they listened to the radio. So all my friends were listening to me and calling up and requesting me to play songs. When I got to Rollins College, I went straight to the radio station. I want to broadcast games. I want to do my own talk show. My senior year at Rollins, I went to Channel 2 here in town and knocked on the door and said, I'd love to be a sports intern. They had never had an intern before, but I talked my way into it. So the story really is just the passion of knowing at an early age that this is kind of where I want to go. And then the process of figuring out how to do it. And then the highlights are, I got to ESPN. I wanted to be on air like most people at Channel 2 here in Orlando. I was the weekend news producer. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I got to work in sports. Great days to work because the weekend guy is usually off on Monday, Tuesday. So I got to go out with the photog and shoot the stories and whatever. And I do my own stand-ups and they didn't make air. I talked them into letting me do a live shot one time. One time, the weekend guy was on vacation and the main guy was in Indianapolis with the Magic for the Pacers. So I got to do the overnight sports that aired on the 6 a.m. news the next day. So I was working towards this on-air goal. They decided to hire a third guy. I'm like, great, here I am. I'm ready. I got a reel. The guys like me. Worst case scenario is I suck. Then you go try to find somebody else. Well, the news director left for a job in North Carolina. So the decision went upstairs to the general manager. Orlando's the 21st market. He's like, not a starter job. I'm not putting a 23-year-old who's never been on the air before on the air here. Oh, well. So they hired a news reporter out of Raleigh, North Carolina by the name of Stuart Scott. So Stuart stole my job and smashed my life to pieces. But we became great friends. And about a year after he went to ESPN, the Golf Channel started. And there were a bunch of people who wanted to leave Bristol, Connecticut and move to Orlando. And there was one dummy who was willing to go the other direction. So I gave up my aspirations of being on air to go produce SportsCenter and play in the big leagues. So from producing my life story, that's my pivot, right? That's the arc where the story changes. And then this career happens. And then there's the second act where I got laid off in 2015 with 300 other great, super talented people and had no idea what I was going to do with my life. A couple of people reached out to me on Twitter and said, hey, would you look at my demo reel and let me know what you think? Great. I had always wanted to be a talent coach. I was doing it kind of on my own at ESPN the latter half of my career. 3 months before I got laid off, they actually made me a full-time talent coach. And so the light bulb went off and I said, oh, I could do this from home. The commute from my living room to my bedroom is pretty good. And people will pay me to give them some coaching. So I started that. And then that's when Dan reached out about this program and said, hey, would you be willing to move to Winter Park and run a program for me? And this was December in Connecticut. I'm like, can I go now? So I've had a couple of different twists and turns. And I always say that this particular job is the dream job I never could have dreamt of. Never in a million years where I thought someday I'll be running a sports program, the only Bachelor of Science degree in the country for sportscasting. So if I'm producing my show, that's the stuff that I'm going to highlight, that you can have a dream and live your dream and then have your dream taken away from you. And then all of a sudden you've got another dream. And that's pretty remarkable.
Well, your career absolutely is remarkable. Gus Ramsey is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. And so knowing that you've been talent, you've cultivated talent, and are now helping talent get to that next step, whether it's what you're doing as a talent coach, and then obviously with Full Sail and Dan Patrick. If you were knowing what you know now about evaluating talent and looking at tape, if I were to sit next to you and watch one of your hits in Orlando, what am I going to hear as far as your evaluation in real time of yourself?
You know, it's funny. I look at that stuff. I've got a couple of clips on my YouTube channel from my Wesh days. I did stuff back then that I look at and I go, that was pretty good. And then I do other stuff that wasn't great. I've always been pretty charismatic. I used to do theater. Actually, when I went to Rollins, I was originally a theater major. So the microphone, the camera, I've never shied away from that. And I've always been able to kind of engage an audience through my voice and my face and my storytelling ability. So I think at that age, I was already doing that stuff well. I wasn't necessarily a good writer. I didn't necessarily understand the key aspects of storytelling. I didn't necessarily understand how to properly use my voice. I know how to use inflection, but pace is different. You'll hear a lot of people pause all over the place mid-sentence. I'm a big, let's not do that person. We teach, get pause at the period. So it's a mix. I look at, I'm not, let's put it this way, I'm not turned off by it when I see it. I'm not like, oh my God, I can't believe that was me. There's some of it that I think turned out okay.
I love that mindset, because I don't get it why you can be harsh or critical of yourself in a positive way without just like self-berating yourself. Some people, they watch their stuff and they're like, I can't even listen to my voice. I can't even watch myself. I'm horrible. But you don't have to have that mindset. And that doesn't mean that you're like an egotist. You just understand that you have a confidence and that you're always at the same time willing to get better. I have one more question for you. Gus Ramsey is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. So obviously at the heart of what you're doing now, and anybody that's been connected to you in sports broadcasting, you've been behind maximizing those around you, their potential. How close are you? Where do you stack where you stand in terms of your potential?
I am so much smarter now than I was when I came to Full Sail. It's, part of it's just being in an academic environment. There's a lot of smart people here. And I think one of the things that makes you a good leader is putting people around you who are as smart, if not smarter than you. Luckily for me, that's not hard to do. And I found a great group of people. My staff and I, we've got 330 years of industry experience. I didn't hire teachers, I hired professionals. And so I've learned so much more about the business because for the long time I'm a producer. This is what I have to focus on. And now I'm learning about so many other things. And then just being around smart people every day has made me smarter. So from a potential standpoint, I think I'm a lot better now. Like if I could go back and be 30-year-old Gus Ramsey at ESPN, I would have been a better producer. I would have been a better coworker. Everybody feels this way. You get to a certain point in life, it's like, oh, if I only knew then what I know now, kind of thing. So I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm happy with where the program's at. And, I just always kind of think about my dad and how he was a teacher and a coach. And somehow I've become a teacher and a coach, and I never in a million years would have thought that was going to be the thing, because like I said, I thought I was going to be on air. I thought I'd be anchoring SportsCenter one day. And then I figured once I got to ESPN, I'm not leaving. I'll be here until I'm 65. I'll take my Disney stock and I'll go home. So the fact that it's gotten to this point, if this is max potential, I'm good with it.
I love the influence of your father's life, and I love tapping into that and how to this day, in your daily work with work and you as a teacher and you as a coach, if you will, how you're so understanding of where that comes from, where you are in terms of your approach to coaching and teaching, and how your father has played a role in formulating your thought process.
Well, we talk a lot in the program, and I have this conversation with my clients all the time, is the process of finding your voice. And as a broadcaster, that's something that we're focused on all the time. And it's a journey. And it's hard when you get an 18-year-old kid out of high school who comes here and you say, look, we're going to spend a lot of time about finding your voice. And what that really means is being yourself.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will look into that camera and read it off the top and feel like they have to be what they've seen. Right. And we all, oh my gosh, I'm doing news, so I've got to be the straight up whatever guy. Yeah. And we had Nicole Briscoe. She's one of my guest faculty members. And she talked about for the longest time, she tried to be two Nicoles. And it was when she finally just said, to heck with that. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to be Nicole on the air. I think her career really started to take off and her personality really started to shine. So even for me, finding my voice as a program director and an instructor has taken time. I never did anything like this before when I took this job. And 6 years from now, when we reach the 10-year mark here, I'll probably still be in the process of finding my voice. But having my father's influence, and I went to the school that he taught at with my 5 siblings, and he was my basketball coach and my baseball coach. So I saw firsthand what he was all about. So even though it was a long time ago, kind of getting a sense of what his voice was probably helped me channel my way into finding mine as an educator.
Here's what I know. Despite you saying that there have been stages where you have worked on finding your voice, and that's an ongoing lifelong mission. What I do know that no matter what you've done, you have been around a winning team, whether it's ESPN, whether it's what you're doing now, and you go to a coach and a teacher, people want to be around winners. And that's why people keep flocking to you, and why they want to go to your school, and why they want to be coached by you, because you're a winner. You might still, and we're always finding our voice, but the voice you utter right now is powerful and it's compelling, and people gravitate toward it. And I am so thankful, Gus, for you taking out of your super busy schedule to share your story here with me on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Gus Ramsey, program director, Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting at Full Sail University. Thank you so much, Gus, for your openness and for taking us down a beautiful journey and adventure through your life.
Oh, my pleasure. We'll do it again sometime.
Yes.
I'll tell you about Bill Simmons and I growing up together and thinking we were going to be the next Mike and the Mad Dog.